Brace yourself. Can it pass up anytime now? Collect yourself. Does it ever be the same in this sad world? Walk around a lot a bit, trying to make the pieces fit to a puzzle with a million missing pieces. When I'm feeling fine is when I discover that I'm afraid to blow my cover, and there's something very wrong with this. So sit back in your hole.
Good morning, everybody. Good to be with you today. We're only going to have a short discussion today. We're going to go back in and take another look at a couple parts of the first chapter of Epic of Gilgamesh. But now we're in the portion of the course, which is the whole rest of the course, where we're actually diving into the literature. Just a couple things to be aware of. One, as you saw yesterday, it's going to be important to have a charged iPad with you just about every day in class so that you can do the readings, because we're reading from, my goodness, we're probably reading from nearly 20 different books. It was not possible to buy class sets of 20 different books. So, the administration compromised with me and bought me 0. So we'll be using the iPads for that. If you miss class, this is always a policy, but it's still early in the year. So if you miss class, especially now that we're into the literature, you want to check Schoolage and you want to look for 2 things. Right? If we did reading that day, there'll be a post that has the day's readings. And if we read it together in class but you weren't here, you need to read that, do the reading yourself, and there'll be a video to watch. And often the video is of us doing the readings. You kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You don't have to read the readings, then watch the video. You can read along with us in the video and then also get all the extraordinary commentary from our panel of experts. Panel of literary experts seated right here in this particular layer of space. And also, you miss the action when you're not here, because there was some action yesterday, was there not, Rat Maggot? Yeah, you beat the crap out of him yesterday. Okay, if you look on Schoology today's post, just a couple of excerpts from what we read yesterday from Gilgamesh chapter 1 that I want to go back into and make a couple of observations about. So here's the first excerpt. This is at the point when the harlot, who was portrayed by Tyler, is sent to tempt Gilgamesh. For 6 days and 7 nights they lay together, for Enkidu had forgotten his home in the hills. But when he was satisfied, he went back to the wild beasts. Then when the gazelle saw him, they bolted away. When the wild creatures saw him, they fled. Enkidu would have followed, but his body was bound as though with a cord. His knees gave way when he started to run. His swiftness was gone. And now the wild creatures had all fled away. Enkidu was grown weak, for wisdom was in him, and the thoughts of man were in his heart. So he turned and sat down at the woman's feet and listened intently to what she said. You were wise, Enkidu. Tyler, you want to reprise the rule?
You were wise, Enkidu, and now you've become like a god. Why do you want to run wild with the beasts in the hills? Come with me. I will take you to strong-walled Uruk, to the blessed temple of Ishtar and of Anu, and of love and of heaven. There Gilgamesh lives, who is very strong, and like a wild bull he lords it over men.
Okay, so Enkidu, who up till then is a wild man living in a natural paradise in harmony with all the animals, he then encounters a woman for the first time, right? And the woman is sent there to tempt him away from that natural paradise and into civilization, and to offer him wisdom. He gives into the temptation, he lays with the woman, and the result is that he becomes wise because of his encounter with the woman. Now, I want you to compare what you just heard to this from the second chapter of Genesis. So to put things in historical context, Genesis, the oldest it can possibly be is 14th century BC, because the traditional author used to say it was written by Moses, and that's when he lived. Most scholars will tell you that the written text as we have it now, at least in its final form, comes more like from the 6th and 7th century BC, although the story certainly went through centuries of formation. So as an oral story, it probably does date back at least that far. But at any rate, you're 1,000 years after Gilgamesh when Genesis is written. So the Lord God then took the man. So this is the very beginning, all right? The first man, Adam. The Lord God then took the man and settled him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate and care for it. The Lord God gave man this order: you were free to eat from any tree of the garden, except, and if we know the story just from having sort of absorbed it from culture, but aren't really familiar with the text, we probably expect to hear except for the apple tree, because everyone always calls the forbidden fruit an apple. That's not what the text says. It's a magic fruit. You are free to eat from any of the trees of the garden except the tree of knowledge of good and evil. From that tree you shall not eat. When you eat from it, you shall die. The Lord God said, it is not good for man to be alone. I'll make a helper suited to him. So the Lord God formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds of the air, and he brought them to the man to see what he would call them. Whatever the man called each living creature was then its name. The man gave names to all the tame animals, all the birds of the air, and all the wild animals, but none proved to be a helper suited to the man. So the Lord God cast a deep sleep on the man. While he was asleep, he took out one of his ribs, closed up its place with flesh. The Lord God then built the rib that he had taken from the man into a woman. When he brought her to the man said, this one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called woman, for out of man, so woman is literally like womb man, because she came out of the man's womb, or is the man with a womb. This one shall be called woman, for out of man this one has been taken. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife, and the two of them become one body. The man and his wife were both naked, yet they felt no shame. Now, Genesis now is going to add in another element that Gilgamesh doesn't have yet. Now the snake was the most cunning of all the wild animals that the Lord God had made. He asked the woman, did God really say, you shall not eat from any of the trees of the garden? I'm ashamed to say I never caught this part till this morning. The commandment to not eat of the tree came before the woman existed, so she was not given the commandment, but she's about to be held responsible for it. The woman answered the snake, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden. It's only the fruit of the tree in the middle that God said you shall not eat. That's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But the snake said to the woman, you certainly will not die. God knows well that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you'll be like gods who know good and evil. The woman saw that the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eyes, and the tree was desirable for gaining wisdom. So she took some of its fruit and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, so they sewed fig leaves together and made loincloths for themselves. So what happens in the Genesis account 1,000 years later, we're still following some of the patterns given to us by the original story, the Epic of Gilgamesh, where now Adam, who is parallel to Enkidu, spends his time in the garden with all the animals, and yet there's still something missing. He doesn't quite realize what's missing until he encounters what's missing, until he encounters a woman for the first time. And then the woman tempts him to do what he thinks he's not supposed to do, and he does it, and yet for some reason the temptation is a temptation to wisdom. You know, it's not my place to comment to try to understand why is it that knowledge of good and evil is forbidden. It's not allowed to have that. I have my own reading of the text that doesn't really matter at this moment. Enkidu gives into temptation and he becomes wise. Adam gives into temptation and he becomes wise. Both are tempted by women, and yet in the Hebrew story, it's really an entirely negative experience. All right. In the Gilgamesh story, it's a mixed blessing. Enkidu leaves behind the innocence of simple forest life, and there really is a loss there. but then he enters into civilization, which is a real gain. Adam leaves, because if I'd have kept reading, they're cast out of the garden and then they're cursed. You're going to have to dig in the dirt for the rest of your life. For by the sweat of your brow shall you eat. And poor ladies are cursed with pain in childbirth as a result of eating the fruit. There'll be another parallel, but let me just move forward in Gilgamesh here. Another excerpt from Gilgamesh, all right? So this is after Gilgamesh has had the dreams. He dreams of a meteor. He dreams of a great axe, and both symbolize that he's going to meet this Enkidu dude. Gilgamesh tells his dreams to his mother Ninsun, and it's implied, doesn't say, but it's implied in the text that Ninsun tells Tyler, the harlot, and then the harlot retold them to Enkidu. And now she said to Enkidu, when I look at you, you have become like a god. That's the same thing that the serpent promises by eating the fruit, that you'll become like gods who know. When I look at you, now that you have slept with me, essentially, when I look at you, you've become like a god. Why do you yearn to run wild again with the beasts in the hills? Get up from the ground, the bed of a shepherd. He listened to her with care. It was good advice that she gave. She divided her clothing in two, and with the one half she clothed him, and with the other herself. There's a parallel again to after Adam and Eve's eyes are opened, they realize they're naked, and so they make clothing for themselves for the first time. Here, Enkidu realizes he's naked, and so once he's had this eye-opening encounter with wisdom, that's when he starts putting his duds on. He became merry. His heart exulted and his face shone. He rubbed down the matted hair of his body and anointed himself with oil. Enkidu had become a man. One of the reasons that these ancient mythic texts from all over the world, one of the reasons they've always fascinated me, why I haven't been able to break the hold they have over me, is if you scratch the surface. So on the surface, there's a lot of surface level silliness in myths, all right? The logic doesn't always add up. People do things we know are impossible. People's reasoning is like, well, why would you kill those 1,000 guys for that reason? But underneath the silliness, these stories are the product of the human heart's wonder at its encounter with the mysteries of reality. And so underneath the surface of silliness, there is often, really profound truth being expressed in these stories. In this case, notice, at the same time, it's said that Enkidu has become like the gods. It's also said that he has become a man. What the poet, the Gilgamesh poet, the nameless poet, authors didn't sign the work at the time. What the nameless Gilgamesh poet is doing is he's saying that among all the creatures on the earth, there's something uniquely dignified about the human person. That the human person bears a likeness to the gods, a likeness to the divine that can't be found in any other creature. I won't open it back up, but in the Genesis text, when man and woman are created, it says they're created in the image and likeness of God. So there's more resonance from the insights of Gilgamesh into the Genesis narrative, and more importantly, it's really profound insight into what it is to be human. Because watch what happens once Enkidu has become a man. Watch what immediately happens to him. So he's merry living with the shepherds till one day, lifting his eyes, he saw a man approaching. He said to the harlot, "Woman, fetch that man here. Why has he come? I wish to know his name." She went and called the man, saying, "Sir, where are you going on this weary journey?" The man answered, saying to Enkidu, "Gilgamesh has gone into the marriage house and shut out the people. He does strange things in Uruk, the city of great streets. At the roll of..." We'll skip a couple lines here. You remember what Gilgamesh is doing? He's sleeping with all the brides on their wedding night. So this man is complaining. Now, look at Enkidu's response. This is right after Enkidu becomes human. And his response, at these words, Enkidu turned white in the face. I will go to the place where Gilgamesh lords it over the people. I will challenge him boldly. I will cry aloud to him in Uruk. I have come to challenge the old order, for I am the strongest here. Enkidu has spent no time around other people. He is not part of this civilization. He knows nothing about civilization. And the instant his eyes are open and he becomes human, the Sumerians would not have had this term, but his power of empathy is immediately switched on. To be a man, to be a human in the mind of the Gilgamesh poet, is to care for the needs of others, to see in the face of the other a reflection of myself in some way, to know that when I look at even Caitlin Potter here, when I look at even Caitlin Potter, I don't know what's going on behind her face. I don't have any direct access to her thoughts, her feelings, her inner life. And yet I can tell she has one because I see that she's a human like me, and I know that I have one, and therefore I can feel with her. And once I'm able to feel with someone, according to the Gilgamesh poet, I then have responsibilities. I then have responsibilities to use whatever power I have to stand up for the person whose rights are being trampled on. All that deep wisdom from a story about a magic super caveman formed by the gods who slept with a prostitute for 7 nights straight. And from that, we have the human condition in a nutshell. I promise you, my friends, that the work we're doing, that the leisure that we are doing together in this course is absolutely worthwhile. Questions, comments, objections to that? Okay, I'm going to end the video, and then I'll tell you what we're doing next.
Walk around the ladder bit, trying to make the pieces fit to a puzzle with a million missing pieces. When I'm feeling fine is when I discover that I'm afraid to blow my cover, and there's something very wrong with this. So slip back in your hole, or get back in your cave. If I'm going down, I'm taking someone with me.